In India, dissent is more vibrant than actually the government's voice. That is the reason why we are suffering at the hands of institutions like Freedom House.
Hi, I'm Shoma Chaudhury. Thanks for watching ENQUIRY. Global democracy tracker Freedom House recently downgraded India from being a leading nation of the free world to being only partly free under the Modi government. To discuss all the implications of this disturbing development, I'm delighted to have on the show today Ram Madhav. Ram is a RSS ideologue, a former general secretary of the BJP, and he's recently written a book called Because India Comes First, which examines crucial issues of nationalism and identity. Thank you very much for joining me, Ram.
Thank you. My pleasure also.
So, Ram, you've just published this book, Because India Comes First. And both in the book and in your columns, you've been speaking about, this difference between ideology and idealism. And you say that you yourself think of yourself as an idealist rather than an ideological karyakarta, because ideology means you have a closed mind, whereas what you need is to keep your mind open. And famously also you spoke of RSS glasnost when Mohan Bhagwatji spoke in Vigyan Bhavan. So the question I want to start with is that in what ways have you opened your mind, changed your positions from, say, your grooming in the RSS and your party being in power now? What are some critical ways in which your ideas have changed?
Yes, thank you. Ideologies, as they are understood, are generally certain closed schools of thought. Ideologies expect the adherents to stick to certain fixed ideas. On the other hand, idealism gives you an opportunity to open up, get new ideas, try and do the best that is possible for you to do for the society. So I always believe that together with ideology, idealism is also an equally important ingredient that everybody in public life must have. So since you referred to that article of mine about glasnost, mm-hmm. I know that that article has ruffled some feathers in my own organization also. That is primarily because of probably some misunderstanding about the meaning of glasnost. Glasnost only meant opening up, greater openness, which President Gorbachev tried to introduce in the Soviet Union system. It had led to perestroika also, systemic changes also. I only talked about the glasnost because I always believed that an organization whose only objective is supposed to be the Rashtra Sarvopari is how we describe it. Nation first. That's the only objective of RSS as we understood in all these years. We put it in different words, but the ultimate objective is that when Rashtra Sarvopari is the objective, you should always be open in your thinking. I found in Sri Mohan Bhagwatji greater openness and greater preparedness for engaging with newer circles, entertaining newer ideas and all that. In that sense, he has been definitely a very refreshingly new type of leader for the RSS at a very critical juncture. I strongly believe that ideologies, of course, they are important, but for parties, ideologies are important for winning elections. But once you are through the election, once you are the ruling establishment, what should dominate and guide you must be your idealism.
So I asked you the question that in what ways do you think the RSS and the BJP have become more open or shifted positions in any critical ways, by having the experience of coming to power?
No, it is not about shifting positions. That also how we misunderstand idealism and openness. Openness, glasnost, openness is about allowing different ideas to come to you, give your ear to different ideas. That is openness. In that sense, yes, I have seen the RSS chief engaging. RSS is generally perceived as a Hindu organization committed to working for the Hindu society,
right?
Which it does very effectively. But it has opened up It has engaged with different sections of the society, different religious groups in the country. I mean, under Mr. Bhagavat, it has started even engaging with different countries, their leaders, even ambassadors of different countries, and his forthrightness. If you recall what he said at the Delhi intellectual conclave, the 3-day conclave that he held, 3-lecture series he had held a few years ago, he was very categorical about the idea of Hindu Rashtra. He said Hindu Rashtra meant bringing together all the 1.3 billion Indians. And if we are excluding any one group, means that cannot be Hindu Rashtra. I mean, this kind of forthrightness, this kind of openness to openly talk to the intellectual society and those outside the RSS scheme of things is something that we have seen increasingly in the RSS in the last couple of decades under Mr. Bhagavat.
So, Ram, I'm going to come back to this issue. On Inquiry, I did an interview with Vinay Sahasrabudheji also. And when I asked him to describe the idea of India, he spoke of it as a spiritual democracy, as a place of plurality, as a place where dissent is integral. Now, these are wonderful definitions of ourselves as a country or as a people, as a civilization. In practice, it works out differently. So I'll challenge you on that a little later. Another interesting thing that you have been speaking of is that how recently different leaders and governments are using the tools of democracy to become authoritarian. How's India doing on the freedom front? You know that Freedom House has recently downgraded India as partly free. So are you concerned about India itself, your own government? Do you feel that it's moving towards authoritarianism?
No, purely on an academic basis, I can say that democracies globally are facing renewed challenges from different new groups. In fact, I always describe the present scenario as a heteropolar scenario, where other than the states, other than the nations, many other players have become important, significant, powerful. They do not recognize your national boundaries. They do not even, respect governments and their law of the land of many countries. So the democracies especially are faced with a totally different global scenario. Now, in this scenario, in order to protect the interests of their respective nations from the emerging new scenario, sometimes even those democratic leaders are sometimes turning to certain authoritarian measures. Right or wrong is not a black and white question that you can ask and I can answer, because you need to address the existing scenario. Today, one Greta Thunberg, one young girl from somewhere in the world, some corner of Europe, can rattle governments. That is the kind of scenario we have entered into. So in that scenario, unless you come up with proper global institutions, or unless you improve the functioning of the existing global institutions, the first casualty will be democracy. Take it from me. But it will have two types of impact. One, either because of these lone wolves, because of these non-state players, the democracies will either be weakened, which you have seen during the Arab Spring in many countries. Even democracies have also collapsed. Several of them also were dictatorships. So states will collapse, or states, in order to ward off this challenge, will become more authoritarian. Either way, democracy is the victim. From the very academic point of view, I said it. Now, you asked about Freedom House recent report. See, I disagree with their findings about India for one very important reason, that a very otherwise non-controversial act like Citizenship Amendment Act has been cited by Freedom House as though that was an indication of lack of freedom and lack of democracy in India. That means they have not understood the Indian conditions properly. They were probably carried away with certain reports. In that, I blame them for not going fully deep into the reality, but also I probably expect our own system also to do better. I mean, when you bring in such major changes in the country, you should also tell the world how they are in line with the global liberal thinking. They are not against the democratic values. This we have to also convey to rest of the world. I will be not fully happy when when we simply dismiss that, you don't give sermons to us. Who are you to say? Because at one point we want them to, give us all the certificates. We take them to Kashmir, this, that. But at one point you say, no, I don't. Who are you to give me? It doesn't work that way. So we are doing good things. We should convey to the world, convince the world that the things that we are doing are good things. Otherwise, I really don't agree that there is any threat to democracy or threat to freedom in this country.
So, Ram, you brought up many issues, so we'll go through it one by one. I think the important thing you made is, of course, communication. If the government feels it's doing something, it's important for the government to persuade rather than just say we are not interested in the world's opinion. So we live in a globalized world, and so that's an important point you've made. But at the same time, when we speak about freedoms, and you yourself said it's a cause of concern, whether it's in reaction or whether it's by design, that governments are getting authoritarian across the world. In India, we've seen a spate of cases against students, against activists, and these are not just ordinary cases, but they are under sedition, they are under terror laws, they are fairly draconian measures being taken by those who are just seen as dissenters or who are in argument with the government. Now, a basic fundamental thing of democracy is that you can argue with your government. You can have, as long as you're not doing anything illegal or criminal. But people have been picked up merely for protesting, and cases have been filed on them. Now, it's true that the courts may later dismiss those cases, but the fact that the government has an impulse to even file a FIR under sedition or terror shows a illiberalism in our own government, and that's become a cause of concern. Would you be open to that?
Firstly, we all should desist from too much generalization that we make. Now, in our country, there are portals, there are websites, there are online magazines, journals dedicated to hating this government, not even criticizing. Their only program is hate this government. Even if this government does very good thing also, they will somehow find fault and write volumes against this government. They are all doing it. Nobody is stopping them. I don't want to name them. You can easily imagine. You yourselves have been a very strong critic of this government and its policies for reason or no reason. So why are we generalizing that everybody who is criticizing is sent to jail? It's not happening. In certain specific cases, if government finds certain legal action is needed to be taken, the question that probably I'm willing to agree with you is, when certain legal action is mandated, for want of any other law, probably they are resorting to these archaic laws like sedition law. To that extent, I agree. But we should not generalize that every dissenting voice is being put behind bars using laws like sedition. No, it's not happening. In India, dissent is more vibrant than actually the government's voice. That is the reason why we are suffering at the hands of institutions like Freedom House. Because you are dominating the discourse than the government. So whether those laws, sedition laws, are relevant in the 21st century scenario is something I totally agree with you. These archaic laws have to be revisited. The situation has changed. We need to come up with new laws to tackle these kind of challenges. Some may find it a little odd that somebody who had a different opinion and used social media platforms to articulate it, if this sedition law is against him or her, irrespective of age, age is no issue. Law doesn't go by the age of the person.
Not the age issue, the disproportionate nature of it.
But the point is, yes, we need to come up with probably new kind of legislation. That's what the government is now doing. Social media related certain laws are being contemplated.
So, conversation is running ahead of itself because I do want to discuss the new internet laws as well. But I just want to come back to the issue of Disha Ravi and Greta Thunberg that you brought up. Now, I think, I'm at least someone that has been open to seeing in a democracy, if a government like yours gets a massive mandate, it's very important to understand what is the positive messaging that people are responding to, right? I think it's equally important then to look at what is making that vision unattractive or worrying for many others in the country. When someone like Greta Thunberg, I've just done an interview with a climate activist, and he was talking about the impact that young people like Greta Thunberg have had because the youth of the world are gathering up. Governments actually, because it's emotional, governments have been forced to listen. So in some ways, Greta has had massive impact. Why would our government respond with the kind of illiberal knee-jerk reaction to young people disagreeing with the government?
Firstly, Greta Thunberg's disruption potential is very well appreciated because social media amplifies her voice. There are interest groups which amplify her voice. But if very learned people like you also exaggerate that capacity into thinking that entire climate activism in the world is happening only because of that girl's one emotional outburst, I pity that kind of assessment. In this world, remember, you people can't exaggerate the capacity.
Only in the
India has been committed to climate change issues for last 5 years. We have done so much. Many other world leaders are working from Al Gore's time. So much of awareness has been created. Now suddenly you stand up and say one small girl is creating this awareness. No, she's creating disruptions in the system. Those are good or not is a different thing. I mean, you cannot frame question as if entire climate activism is happening because of that girl. It's not so.
Can I just, in the interest of accuracy, Ram?
Having said it,
Ram, just 1 second, if you let me just create a bit of accuracy in your response, because we'll get a better understanding from you, is that by no means did I use the word only, or to say that climate activism has been even catalyzed by her. What I was saying is that she has played a role in escalating the awareness, penetrating into public consciousness, media picking up these issues. She has had that impact. By no means did I use the word only, or to say that India, it's interesting. Indira Gandhi.
What I am saying is, you must read the history of climate activism in this world. It is much bigger.
Of course.
Much more profound. And we as a government under Prime Minister Modi are fully committed to the Paris climate agenda.
Right.
Where no big country, including countries like America, is willing to, bet its fortunes. We are doing it. So nobody needs to tell us that some Greta Thunberg is activating you for climate change and all that. No, that's not the issue. Issue is how do you tackle with these disruptors? I see them as disruptors. They have a voice. Their voice is amplified because of all of you, also because of the social media. How do governments tackle? That is where I am saying. In fact, since I have written about it, I am saying this, repeating it. It is one thing for national governments to respond. They respond in different ways. India has decided that these voices should be scrutinized through normal legal system. But should we do that, or should we look for a greater framework at the global level through which you tackle all these challenges? It was limited. It was no climate activism or nothing. It was limited to farmers' agitation.
Right.
Where is climate activism in that? Farmers' agitation is actually, they are doing injustice to ordinary farmers. That's my view.
Sure. So Ram, that's my critical question here. I was not bringing in climate activism. I was trying to understand your position, and through you, the government's position on people's right to have views. Let's assume they feel the farmer laws are not good for farmers. Now that is, all democracies arise out of dialogue, and good positions come out of that noise of a democracy, right? So merely questioning the right of someone who's not an Indian or not a farmer to have a view on the matter, filing an FIR anonymously also against someone tweeting or having a toolkit, does that not show a kind of illiberal knee-jerk position on the part of our government? Just to finish that, that our own government and the BJP, in fact, has been a front runner, a pioneer in using social media. When all other political parties were sleeping, the BJP, you yourself have played a big role in it. Arvind Gupta played a big role, understood the power of this technology. You've had 20 lakh volunteers, social media volunteers. You've done so much political messaging with that. Your party has gone to America and lobbied, so what I'm saying is cross-border osmosis, penetration of ideas. Your own party has pioneered it.
I got it. So first of all, you must remember that one case against Disha Ravi or one FIR against Greta Thunberg doesn't mean in this country nobody has a right to voice a different opinion or protest. Everybody is doing it and everybody is free to do that. Social media, if you open up, it is full of criticism of our formulas. Who is stopping them? That is why I'm again repeatedly saying don't generalize things. Their actions were taken based on certain specific issues. In this particular case, as far as I understood, the whole argument that India's reputation should be damaged globally by damaging its goodwill that it has created through chai, through yoga. What has it got to do with farmer sanitation? Please explain to me. Why should India's image be destroyed globally? Why should India's reputation be damaged globally? On those issues, you think that government should not take legal recourse. And you yourself have admitted, yes, after that, a preliminary action was taken. Then courts have taken their own view and they have let Disha Ravi free on bail now. So it's a normal legal process. Who else is being harassed? Mr. Tikkai sitting there every day is criticizing government. Did we stop him? Or you are all criticizing government. Did we stop you? So don't generalize things. Certain measures were taken because there existed a legal ground. If that legal ground, according to you, is wrong, Indian judiciary will definitely let you off. So there is no illiberalism in it. But if you expect that people may say anything, but government should keep quiet, I think that is over expectation.
Of course, if you're talking about perception management, and like I said, you were early pioneer in using social media, no one would have known about yoga and chai. It's actually the action that has brought up more attention on the issue than it would otherwise have. So this is also learning for government, like with what impulse do you respond to those who criticize you? I agree, it's not like everyone in India who's criticizing is under duress. But there's a kind of sense that there are IT raids, income tax raids, or there are FIRs being filed. Is there cause for introspection? Let me put it that way to you.
Look, IT raids, income tax department actions, do they consult media channels and everybody before taking those actions?
No, they must be consulting government.
They go by the available complaints before them, the evidence before them, they take their actions. If there are issues, our legal system is very vibrant, it responds. You have a larger issue to raise that, isn't it reflecting badly on the government? Leave it to the political establishment, let them bother about it. If it is reflecting badly, why would any political party do that? It's not about politics at all. It's about institutions doing their job. Now, we are used to, for decades after independence, we are used to allowing a very long rope to wrongdoers in this country. Now, when some effort is being made to tighten the noose, now we are all saying that, it's, you are getting bad name. No, it's okay. It's not about bad name. What is good for the country, what is good for the economy, that should be done by the government. That is, in fact, my book's title is that, because India comes first.
Right. I'm going to come back to us discussing your idea of India, because that's crucial. When we say India comes first, it's which idea of India comes first. So we'll come back to that. I just want to stick with this issue a little bit more, Ram, and the importance of creating space to speak. Another statement that you've been making is that social media is now becoming a threat to democracy, and that there's, non-political players, as you said, but you've also said left liberals, anarchists are taking over the medium and can topple governments. First of all, can you define what you mean by left liberals, and what is your angst against left liberals?
There's no need to get into the entire definitional discourse. Left liberals have a different total world view when it comes to many issues, which doesn't doesn't go with our kind of thinking. There is a space like, social media provides space to everybody. Just as it's provided space to us, it provides space to the other viewpoint also, which is in this case left liberal viewpoint also. So
right.
Today, that viewpoint has certainly a solid resonance, solid foundation, solid base in the social media. We need to tackle that challenge.
What that has led to now is two things. There's an amendment of rules 2021 and the GOM report that has also come out in the media, where some ministers and intellectuals got together to discuss managing a narrative, of neutralizing those who are critical of government, tracking journalists, enlisting journalists. Now, one key fundamental building block of democracy is the separation between powers, separation between media and government. What this report has revealed is a very active program on the part of the government to manage a media narrative. Do you think that this is something which is problematic for a democratic government to want to do?
No, Shoma, the minister concerned has categorically stated that the intention was not to control, regulate, or dominate the media voices. The intention was to propel those institutions for some kind of a self-regulation. You see, for mainstream media, there are certain systems in place, certain internal mechanisms by which the entire process is regulated. That kind of a mechanism doesn't exist with digital media. There are no institutional, safeguards or no institutional framework that would regulate it. So some such thing has to happen, because after all, like mainstream media, the social media also has today acquired humongous, proportions, influence, and all that. So all these new, as I understood from minister's statement, all these new laws are intended to encourage the concerned platforms and concerned institutions to have some kind of a regulation. Yeah, how can we go on? Shoma, you yourself must be a victim of a lot of trolls, aren't you?
Yeah.
So how do you handle it? And I see lots of people complaining about Mr. Amit Malviya. Since you mentioned his name, I'm saying he's using his army against us. Then do you want some kind of a regulation or not? So it's in the interest of everybody, irrespective of our ideologies, that some kind of a regulation. But having said it, I fully agree with you. If there is any effort made to throttle any voice or to restrict the freedom of expression, that will be a death knell for democracy. Right from the time of our constitution making, right or wrong, we have opted for it. We decided that we will be a liberal, open democracy. One may contest that no, it's not working. That is different thing. We have committed ourselves to our constitution. We should safeguard it. But that doesn't mean there should not be any restrictions or any regulations.
So in fact, on self-regulation, I agree with you. There is huge need for that, because social media is, like you said, it's very much part of the fabric of our society. It can't exist outside any framework. But that's the thing, Ram, when you're saying to remain open-minded, if there's a positive agenda that the government and the BJP are working towards, will it be open to also examining where it has an impulse towards authoritarianism, or it has an impulse towards control rather than regulation? There's a difference between control and regulation. While the new laws have asked for digital publications to self-regulate, but at the same time, it's also given power to a secretary level person in the government to, demand that something is taken off. Basically, censorship just at a secretary level, So why those impulses? Why not stick with the democratic impulse for thoughtful regulation rather than government control?
First of all, let the process about that act be completed. It will go before the parliament. It will be scrutinized in the parliament. It will come out in a final form. But as far as I understand, we ourselves have been victims of this kind of, authoritarian politics during the emergency period. So there is no impulse in us at any level to try and throttle the independent voices in this country. I think you should take it from me that we don't have any such impulse. If at all, we are always for freedom of expression that should flourish in this country or anywhere in the world. What final form these laws will take, let us definitely see. But you must remember one thing. In any democracy, its security lies in proper functioning of all the balancing institutions. Even if the political establishment demonstrates certain proclivity for strong actions and all, you have other arms of democracy like the judiciary, like the media. The mainstream media, in this case especially, they have a role to play. They have a role to educate the people. I'm sure together, all of us, the political establishment, in this case our government, also you all, media, judiciary, we all will together ensure that India's democratic credentials are always upheld properly.
So, like I said, when one hears you all articulate a vision, there's no argument on that. It's what happens in the practice. So let me just come back to when we're talking about managing a narrative, Ram. The BJP, Amit Malviya's army or trolls, depending on how one calls it, there's been very coordinated action against people by the BJP's IT cell. Like, for instance, the Amir Khan story where Snapdeal was downgraded because of some loose remark that he made. I just spoke about this government GOM report, which talked about enlisting journalists and of color coding journalists and of scrutinizing journalists. Are those things to worry about, Ram? Because certainly some parts of the country are worried about the signaling that comes out of that. There was a surveillance story of activists and journalists who were put under surveillance.
Now, first of all, I am not really aware of any such color coding and all that. I'm hearing for the first time from you, Shoma. And I'm sure most of it, if not all of it, is incorrect and mischievous kind of information that is being spread. I don't believe in any of these things. As I said, we always believed in absolute freedom for all the different voices. Now, since you have been repeatedly referring to idea of India, many times people ask me this question: what is this idea? What is your idea of India? I always say only two things. One, my idea of India is that there will be many ideas of India. That's number one. Number two, for me, I am an Indian is the only idea, basic idea for me. On that count, please remember, if somebody says that I want to damage the reputation of India, then I have a duty to say that no, what you are saying is wrong.
Actually, you brought up a very
since you referred to that issue again now, asking that question, I'm saying, so on those issues, government will act. Nobody has the right to damage the reputation of this country. So otherwise, we believe, I'm totally unaware of any such thing that you are talking about, color coding and all, though no question. In any case, if any such thing is there, you are a journalist, you all should think among yourselves, is this right? That some of us are branded as pro-government, some of us are branded as anti-government. Is this the duty of the journalists? Journalist should be reporting.
Yeah.
He should be the representative of the truth and facts, nothing else. So journalists have to do their own introspection.
So I totally agree with you on that. Like the media, massive need for introspection there. There's not even a little bit of doubt on that count. But just the fact that a government could want to enlist pro-journalists, go to journalism schools, bring in the young, the idea of indoctrination within the media is a very scary proposition, Ram. But you made a very interesting remark right now. Which is that you said definitely no one should be allowed to hurt the reputation of India. Now, here's probably the heart of the matter, Ram. There's a distinction between criticizing a government and criticizing the country. The country and a government are two separate things. BJP's response to criticism is that it immediately says this is hurting India, this is hurting the reputation of India. So the BJP is not India. Like Indira Gandhi had once said, Indira is India. And that led to the emergency. Do you think the BJP is making this mistake of making the BJP, the party and the government and the country synonymous? They are not synonymous.
So firstly, the extent of criticism, defamation that Prime Minister Modi personally as a leader and our party and our Sangha have endured in all these decades post the independence. If anybody has to complain about it, we should be complaining. I'm surprised you are complaining about what is happening to you all. If you are criticizing the government, who is stopping? As I said, in this country, portals, digital websites, digital magazines are dedicated to opposing this government. Who is stopping? Carry on. Let the government side or the political party side respond to it in its own manner. Assuming for a moment they say that, criticizing BJP means you are criticizing the idea of India. Supposing they say that, you say, stand up and say, no, I'm not criticizing the idea of India. But then problem comes when you side with those who say that India's reputation as a yoga leader or a great chai leader should be destroyed in the world. Then you stand up with them. Then people will say, no, you are not with the Indian interest either. You are against us, okay, that's fine, but you are not even with India. So there, the left liberal, discourse has to be careful. You criticize us, we are not opposing you. We are used to this criticism, not now. As Gandhiji said, we have had our sense of humor, so we are surviving with all this criticism. Now it is your turn, a little bit of criticism endure. We have endured it for 50 years.
How wonderful it would be, Ram, if you have endured, being criticized and lampooned and demonized by the left liberals. How wonderful if you came to power and, like true Hindus, did not do unto others what has been done unto you. That would be some inspired leadership.
Just take one serious note on that. I will never appreciate anybody making targeted personal kind of attacks on anybody else, whether it is done by people from our side or the other side. It's immaterial. No discourse should be personalized, and nobody should be demonized personally. This whole thing that I see, it is sometimes, yes, it happens with probably you also. I see you all also. It happened so much to us, so I can understand the trauma part of it. So that should not happen towards that every one of us. It should not degenerate into kind of a very bad kind of mudslinging and all. Especially personalized vitriol and all should not have any place in our social media discourse.
That's a big statement you're making, Ram. So I'm just going to use the opportunity to push you one notch more on that the government can send out very strong positive signaling if different ministers or karyakartas or important leaders in the entire Sangh Parivar sometimes speak in a violent way or they speak in a communal way. It would send out very positive, strong signaling if the Prime Minister or anyone else in the spectrum penalize them or criticize them publicly, because that's a message being sent out. But that's what's happened with, say, Kapil Mishra or Som in UP, when they have said things like "Goli maro salo ko" or have said other violent things. No action happens against them. In fact, there's a system of reward sometimes that kicks in. So it seems like there's very double messaging going on, and those are the things which one gets critical.
You see, our party is a very big party, very large party. In this party, majority of our leaders speak in a very responsible, very positive way. Yet, if you come across any voices that if somebody finds objectionable, they can always be, the suggestion that any action should be taken. How do you know that those things are not taken note of within the system? Any such thing happens, it is definitely taken note of. Necessary, messaging or necessary corrective action is always taken. But largely, if you look at the larger voice of the government or of the party, it has always been very positive, very sane. Even at in the face of very, very unjust kind of attacks and criticism on us, also we try to respond in a very constructive and positive way. But then you must remember, since you mentioned it, this has to be followed by everybody.
There's a very interesting phenomenon going on now where one is more critical of the opposition than the government. This has never happened before in the history of journalism in India. So I am at least going to stick with the good old journalistic tradition of being more critical of the government than the opposition. Yes, and one has been, when Congress was in power, you were saying that you were speaking of me as the opposite side. But as I would say, as a journalist, one has been as critical of the Congress as now one is of the BJP, because we are meant to be a check on power.
Very true. That's what I have been saying. You know, in a democracy, these are all balancing institutions, judiciary, media, non-governmental organizations. You are the balancing, we are the balancing institutions. Together we constitute democracy. We all have to do our job. I agree with you. I mean, media, its role is to highlight the shortcomings of the government of the day.
I do feel that the relationship between this government and the media is an area of great worry, because there is a perception, Ram, and I will not be able to give particular examples without being up for defamation, but the fact remains that there is a huge perception of either the government censoring through intimidation or through seduction or through government largesse. So there's a very clear sense now of pro-government media and anti-government media, you know. So there have been cases against journalists. They are like, you know, they're invoking these harsh laws. It has definitely created a reputation for the government, which if it is not your intention, maybe it's something time to fix. Would you accept that?
I don't agree that there is any pro-government media and anti-government media per se. I do agree that there are journalists, individual journalists who have got their own certain kind of, you know, you can call it affiliations or you can call it certain political proclivities and all that. You mentioned that journalism's responsibility is to, you know, oppose the government of the day. I don't agree. Journalism's responsibility is definitely to highlight the shortcomings, mistakes, lacunae in the functioning of the government, but also it's equally important if something good is happening for the country, government, the media has a role to highlight that good. Government is the government of 1.3 billion Indians. Maybe it is a BJP government. Yeah, when it comes to BJP, take a strong view. I agree with you. Every journalist is free to take a strong view, but when it comes to government, if it is doing good for the country, highlight that good. How can you expect me as a politician to say that it is right or wrong? Journalists should be above judgment or, you know, regulation of any politicians. It's up to you. Decide how to take the institution forward.
So, you know, we'll get bogged down in details if I stick with this too much longer. But I'm glad that at least, you know, I always say it's important that you articulate a good vision, because then we can hold you to it, you know, so that's important. But to move away from that, Ramna, I want to go back to something you said right at the beginning, when you spoke of, you know, Mohan Bhagwatji saying that the whole vision of Indian nationalism that you stand for is an inclusive one. Why does it not play out in practice that no Muslims have been given tickets by the BJP, you know, in a state like UP? Or when you were talking about messaging, that when you bring out the CAA law or the NRC, it wasn't just low karyakartas, but someone like the Prime Minister himself said, unke kapde se pehchan ho jata hai. When you go to Hyderabad, there's a kind of agenda which is highlighting the fact that Muslims are not entirely an integral part of India, you know. If your agenda is not that, or if it has shifted, why not play this out in practice? Because you have such a big mandate. You could do so much positive work if this essential tension was not there between the idea of India and the BJP.
Firstly, we have Muslim ministers in the government. We have Muslim governors in the country. I mean, I am loath to talking in terms of Hindu and Muslim. But since you raised this issue, I'm only, as a matter of fact conversation, I'm doing this. We have MLAs in our party in many states who are from different minority communities. We have in our party a large presence of members from different minority communities. So this whole discussion about one state, why you have not given seats to particular religious group, etc. Electoral tactics apart, in many states we gave, like this time you see our candidates in many states from all religions. Elections is a different ball game. That doesn't mean we are against any particular community. Despite our best efforts, I'm telling you, people like us have been pushing for it. We are not able to accommodate large number of women. Even that is also a factor that one should ask. Women should have greater political presence also. India always performed better when it comes to women political empowerment compared to other countries. Yet, much more needs to be done. So from that perspective, you say, no, much more needs to be done, I agree with you. But there is no design, no strategy, or no political agenda. to exclude any community. That is totally wrong. Nor is our agenda anything other than what Prime Minister repeatedly says, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. That has been our agenda, that has been our effort.
Can I just bring up the CAA? If this was your intention, I saw very interestingly in another interview that when you were challenged on this and why only 6 religions were named in the Citizenship Amendment, nobody was opposed to the government giving citizenship to certain minorities or to anyone persecuted. It was the specific exclusion of any denomination of Islam from those 6 religions, which created so much anxiety. I saw in an interview that you said, if one wants to include Ahmadiyas, of course, one can include Ahmadiyas. So then, Ram, do you feel that you yourselves are schizophrenic in your desire to project an inclusive intention? And then when it comes to practice, why would you not think like that? You would have never had a problem on your hands if you had included Ahmadiyas in the minorities.
We are so drunk with this false notion of secularism that we don't see anything else. In everything, you people see Hindu-Muslim only. Everything. Why CAA was exclusively for religiously persecuted minorities.
Right. Which Ahmadiyas are also.
This was not our commitment, remember. This was a commitment given by Madam Indira Gandhi in 1972 and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in 1951. We were only giving a legal framework for addressing that commitment given by the previous governments. Nobody is denied any citizenship here. These two parts of the erstwhile United India, which became 2 different countries, the division happened on Hindu-Muslim grounds, religious grounds. There was persecution happening about minorities in those states, in those countries. They were to come into India. They came into India. No post facto. Those who came before 2014 could now claim for citizenship. This act was that. Now you are asking me, why do you say these 6 communities? Your acts have to be specific. Acts cannot be ambiguous. When you are saying minorities from these countries, acts have to define who those minorities are. Ever sit in making acts, then you will know what is an act making. Muslims in Pakistan or Bangladesh are not called minorities there. You can't apply your definition there. So we are also drunk with this false sense of secularism, and then you become, one of some kind of a self-righteousness comes. You see, you are so biased. Where is bias? In this country, anybody can take citizenship. That Adnan Sami, a Pakistani Muslim, was given citizenship during our government's tenure. Who stopped one Pakistani from taking citizenship here? So this is all very false propaganda for the specific reason of defining a particular word in an act. That minority definition was given based on who are treated as minorities in those 2 countries to which this act applies. What I said in that interview was, I would like to correct you. What I said was, look, if anybody feels that certain groups of majority community like Ahmadiyas are also discriminated against in that country, they can always seek the help of Government of India. They can always ask Government of India that we are also persecuted in this country. Give us some kind of a legal protection. That's a different matter. As far as CAA is concerned, it has a specific definition of minority in those countries.
So when we're talking about messaging, Ram, and I just want to keep reiterating that the reason I'm putting you on the mat so much is that you were tasked by your party and your RSS organization in the early days to master the art of messaging, and you played a big role in it. So with the NRC exercise in Assam, when the numbers came up and it showed that a large number of Hindus had also not been able to prove their citizenship, then the government said, we'll go back and do the entire exercise again. Then Mr. Amit Shah spoke of the chronology, how famous the phrase has become about the chronology. So I'm again asking you, Ram, that do you think, if I assume that you're saying the intention is not to make Muslims feel insecure in this country, do you think the BJP is failing in its political messaging? Do you think you need to improve your messaging then?
Look, as far as whether our political messaging is working or not, whether
No,
people
it's
are
working
actually
electorally,
or
but
not. You will
I'm
know when
talking
elections
about
happen.
confidence building.
So don't worry about our political messaging. Last
I
year,
know it's working electorally, but we are talking about perception, right? And confidence building.
larger issue of perception about these laws. That is what is more important. These are issues that were felt to be needed for the country. For example, NRC. We could not complete it in 1950s in the state of Assam, when we completed it for the rest of the country in the first census. We could not do it in Assam, so it was mandated to the government by Supreme Court that you complete it. See, no NRC work can be undertaken by government without the approval of the Supreme Court.
I find that another very problematic thing has come up, Ram, which makes it almost like a catch-22, which this government is doing and which is creating this perception of loss of freedom. If some injustice happens from the side of the government and others bring it to notice by speaking about it, what the government then says is that you are inciting others, or by criticizing the government, you are creating a bad name. It's really a catch-22. If you're going to do something wrong and the person who flags it is seen as becoming anti-national, anti-government, inciting, why are you drawing attention to this? You're spoiling the name of the country. What is done in good intention also is now positioned as as a malified action.
Nobody should incite people to take to any violent means. And
that of course.
One. So
but that sadly, I'll tell you.
If somebody is inciting and government says we are inciting, or government or political parties say inciting, see, government hardly says these things. What you are saying is about probably party functionaries or party office bearers, because they may articulate their views differently. See, I said it earlier also. Let 1,000 different voices be heard. That is the idea of India, and that we all should agree. Incitement, etc. We all should desist from it. But one thing I agree with you, these days, branding somebody anti-national has become a little easy thing to criticize. So it has become a kind of a criticism. But what really makes me happy is those who have never believed in the concept of nation also, even if they also get offended if somebody says we are anti-national, which is a good thing. Today, everybody wants to be branded as a nationalist, which is a good thing. But on a serious note, we have to be a little more careful in our public discourse. I agree with you on that.
That's a great statement, Ram. The blurb I'm going to use for the interview is that one. But it's good that you said that. But why people don't want to be called anti-national is because it's become very dangerous to be branded an anti-national. You'll find UAPA, terror, sedition, a lot of laws being invoked against you.
Tell me how many have been arrested under UAPA? Can you please tell me?
But that's very important point that you raised, Ram, because
being created in this country.
Ram, again, I'll come back to political messaging that you don't need to, especially in today's world, you don't need to. What Congress did. What Congress did was put lakhs of you in jail during the emergency.
Right.
Today, any government realizes they don't need to do that. You need to put 6 cases on someone. Everyone self-censors themselves after that because there's a fear factor created. That's just signaling, You needed only 42 lynching cases to happen. It's not like millions were killed, but it sends out a chilling message in society, and you'll appreciate those who are.
So then we should completely do away with our law enforcement institution.
No,
if you have law enforcement, people will be scared. How can this argument?
There has to be good cause. The government, the court itself in the Disha Ravi case, it shows the malified when they're saying that there's no evidence. I kept tweeting at that point.
That I agree. That I'm saying, yes, there is judiciary there. But about fear factor, I'm saying, people still talk. Where is fear in this country?
No, my point was, Ram, that when a good thinking government files a baseless case against someone, by the time the judiciary acts, what it does is it sends out a political messaging. Now, of course, it's up to people's spine whether they'll continue doing that. But we are now talking about what message and reputation the government is putting out about itself. It takes 6 bad cases to do that. Now, two final things, Ram, because we're going to run out of time. I haven't even touched Kashmir.
Out of time, Shoma.
It's good you brought up this issue of numbers, because the other thing which is giving the government a bad name globally and for those who believe in plurality in India is the whole love jihad laws that are being enacted one after the other in BJP ruled states. Now, there I would put the question back to you, Ram, that surely, let me not even invoke the constitution, let me invoke Hinduism, that one believes in plurality, the right to love. We are the most modern culture, civilization, religion, whatever you want to call Hinduism. Where is the evidence that there is some massive Muslim conspiracy to, convert Hindu girls? What are the numbers?
Shoma, if there is no conspiracy or if there is no big scheming happening from any community side, you and I should not worry about those laws. Because nothing is going to happen when there is nothing.
No, because individuals are getting caught in
by evidences. Those laws will go only by evidences. In India, there are certain peculiar situations when it comes to these personal matters. Personal laws are also different in communities in our country. I disagree with that situation. In such a scenario, in some states, in 3 or 4 states in our country, we have anti-conversion laws. They're handled in a very responsible manner. Similarly, these laws, wherever they are being promulgated, after a lot of debate, they are happening, and you are also scrutinizing, media is also scrutinizing those laws, where if there is no issue, there won't be any problem at all. If there is an issue, here is a law which will tackle that problem.
There are already penal laws where if anyone marries against their wish, there's enough laws in the Indian Penal Code to stop that. When you call something love jihad, it doesn't sit with your original message, which is that we want sabka saath, sabka vishwas, sabka vikas. Because your messaging is jihad, conspiracy, creating suspicion. These are the reasons why people are critical of your government, Ram. Otherwise, there's one thing, hard work, as I always say, that's one thing your party and your government does is put in a lot of effort. There would be things to praise if you all were not foregrounding this kind of stuff all the time.
I will convey your concerns to concerned people.
Thank you. Okay, I'm coming to the heart of
it. That you are so concerned about our political image.
Because now you've made it synonymous with the country, I have to worry about the country also. You all are spoiling the reputation of beautiful India. So, Ram, let me come to the final, which is the definition of, I haven't gone into Kashmir because we don't have time, but the idea of nationalism, in the way the BJP defines it, can you spell it out? Again, I heard you say in another interview that you said Nehru articulated the idea of a spiritual India wonderfully. I think you'll get thrown out of the BJP for saying that, praising Nehru. Mr. Modi is starting to look like Tagore, but, Tagore has spoken about the idea of India very differently from the nation, the Germanic idea of nationhood, which the RSS and BJP stands for.
You are wrong. We don't stand for any European or Western idea of nationhood. We stand for the most liberal idea of what we call as Rashtriyata. Nationalism always, immediately brings to mind the European experience and all that. So this Rashtriyata that we stand for is about each and every person, irrespective of his religion, caste, or any difference, each and every person of this country. We only say that India's Rashtriyata, or national identity, did not begin in 1947. We have been a nation for millennia, ek Rashtra. While practicing different religions, we remained one entity called, you call it Bharatiya, you call it Hindu, you call it India, whatever name you call it. So for us, that is Rashtriyata, which has kept us together for 5,000 years or plus. Otherwise, this diverse society, how did it remain one? What is that India you are talking about before 1947, for which we were fighting for freedom? Simply speaking, the existence of this society for 5,000 years or so, in this long history, the existence of this society, what has kept this society one is what we believe as its Rashtriyata.
No argument with that, Ram. So my question then would be, do you also embrace the 500 years of Mughal rule as part of that tradition? Because if you do, And of course, there are negative aspects of that, which one should speak about, criticize. But then why do we create a negative aura around biryani and Urdu and Muslim monuments? Because then the beauty of, if we go back even to 5,000 years, India, Hinduism, the civilization, whatever you want to call this geographic region that we are all so proud of, was its capacity to absorb, to grow, to expand, to amalgamate. So then if you genuinely believe in the civilizational spirit of this area, then why do we create negative connotations around biryani and Urdu and ghazals? And
I don't know who is creating negative connotation about biryani. Everybody eats it.
Come on, your entire party speaks
trivialize this person. See, it's a serious question. Let us keep it serious. Let's not trivialize it. See, there was no 500-year rule of Muslims over India. There were invaders into India. Different types of invaders came from Central Asia. They ruled over parts of India, remember?
Yeah.
But mostly North India. I come from South. Hardly any impact on many of the southern states. So it's one part of the civilizational journey of this country. In that, certain monuments like Taj Mahal, they remain. Even to this day, any foreign visitor comes, he goes there. Subsequently, British came. They did so many things in this country. Some remain, some don't remain. English is remaining. We are talking that language even to this day. Certain things don't remain, which are not needed for an independent nation to articulate its self-respect and its self-identity. So, on that we are clear. We are not against any particular identity, which is a part of this larger identity of 5,000 years. But since you asked that question, because we inherit a particular 300-year, 200-year rule identity. We are different. If somebody says, then we will say no. It's only a part of that long journey of this nation. Those who adopted certain practices that came from outside also should understand that I merely adopted a particular way that has come from outside. For that, there is always freedom in India. But I belong to this long tradition. That is how we see India's national identity. So that doesn't make us against any particular symbol or any particular monument.
I wish everyone spoke in your language, Ram. Maybe you should give better classes to your karyakartas, and some of your ministers.
No. Classes are needed for all of you to actually understand what we are saying correctly. See, probably we have to articulate better. I agree with you. We continuously tell our people these things only. But probably our articulation has to improve when we communicate with the rest of the society, rest of the outside world. But also you all have to closely understand without any prejudices and biases.
Thank you for speaking on Inquiry.
Thank you.